To me, March is what many anglers look forward to all year long and is one of the best times of the year to fish in my opinion. March is my favorite month to fish out of the whole year. It can produce some giants if you know what lures to use. Whenever it comes to selecting lures to use in March, it is important to remember how much changes throughout the month as a whole. Some bass will be up shallow getting ready to spawn, or potentially some have already started to spawn. Also, many places across the southern part of the country are already in the post-spawn stage. It was difficult to select 5 lures to talk about today, but these 5 lures will work in many situations throughout the whole country. Since it was hard to pick 5 lures, I have decided to throw in an extra bonus one somewhere in this video, so make sure you watch it so you guys don't miss out on it. Let me know down below if you agree or disagree with my top 5 lures to use in March. I'm actually kind of curious to see what you guys have to say down below, so make sure you comment and let me know. Also, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. It would mean the world to me. We're on the way to 5K subs by the end of the year, and I'd love to have you guys join the community. It would mean so much to me. So if you haven't, make sure you hit that red button down below. But anyways, guys, let's get into it. The first lure I want to talk about today is the crankbait. A crankbait is a very broad term, but this mainly refers to a square bill and a lipless crankbait. I will throw both of these lures this time of year, and it just kind of really depends on which situation I'm fishing in, and that'll determine which one I select. And these lures definitely catch some huge fish, that's for sure. It doesn't matter if it's a lipless or a square bill, they both catch some huge fish, so if you haven't thrown one this time of year, you are really missing out. One of my favorite colors to throw during the spring is red because of how heavily they feed on craws during the spring. They will hammer a red lipless or a red square bill this time of year. And if you haven't done it yet, you are missing out on one of my favorite bites all year. There's nothing like throwing a red lipless or red square bill. And in my opinion, this is one of the best bites you can get on during the springtime because of how aggressively they will hit this lure. I have had much success throwing a red crankbait and have caught some good sized fish using them this time of year. The lipless crankbait can be fished throughout the whole water column and is one of the most versatile lures you can throw in March. My favorite way I fish the lipless crankbait is utilizing the yo-yo technique. And if you haven't heard of it, it is probably one of the most well-used techniques whenever fishing a lipless crankbait. The yo-yo technique is whenever you let your lipless crankbait flutter down and then lift the lipless crankbait back up. By repeating this process, you can get some good quality bites and it will draw some big reaction strikes out of the bass, especially if they're not wanting to bite. The other way to fish the lipless crankbait is to bump it across the bottom, working it as slow as possible. I normally like to fish the lipless as slow as possible and as slow as I can get away with. By slowing the lipless crankbait down, you will catch some good quality sized bass in your local body of water. There's a secret to fishing a lipless crankbait this time of year that will determine if you catch a lot of bass or get skunked. The trick is to add some rod tip movement whenever you are fishing the lipless crankbait. Whenever it comes to a square bill crankbait, I normally like to burn it up shallow or deflect it off a structure. It really depends on what the bass want for that day will determine if I throw a lipless crankbait or a square bill crankbait. Both are solid choices to use this time of year, and it really just depends on what situation you're fishing in, but both of these lures could potentially catch you your next personal best bass. The second lure I want to talk to you about today is the chatterbait. The chatterbait is one of my favorite moving baits, especially around grass. The chatterbait is one of the best search baits you can throw and can trigger some explosive strikes during the spring. The chatterbait can be fished in many different situations and is a very versatile lure. Personally, I like to use a Z-Man jackhammer because of how quickly the blade will start vibrating whenever it first hits the water. The chatterbait does good in many water conditions, but my favorite time to throw it is in stained or muddy water. However, the chatterbait will do good in clear water too, so don't sleep on it. One of the best things you can do when fishing a chatterbait is changing up your retrieve. One of my favorite ways to fish the chatterbait is by letting it sink to the bottom and giving it a hard pop, then letting it sink back down again. This will trigger a nice reaction strike out of the bass, and something about this retrieval drives them crazy. I also like to fish the chatterbait on a steady retrieve too, but it really depends on what the bass are wanting for that day. Next time you are out during the springtime and the month of March, make sure you have a chatterbait tied on. You could potentially catch your next personal best bass. The third lure I'm going to talk about today is the jig. The jig is probably one of my favorite lures to throw all year just because of the size of the bites that this bait can produce. And Spring is no different. A jig is a very versatile lure and can be fished in many different scenarios depending on where you are fishing at in the country. The jig can be used to catch shallow bass whenever they are getting ready to spawn, and can also be used in deeper water when bass are still sitting deep. The jig can also be fished in many different scenarios around rocks, vegetation, and different types of structure. The drawing power of a large profile jig can result in some huge bites during March. Many anglers use the jig to target bass that are on beds because the larger size profile of the jig will make them mad enough to bite it. Have you thrown a jig before in March? Let me know down below if you have before or not. I'm curious to see if you guys have. And also, what was the biggest size bass you caught whenever you were throwing it in March? It was hard for me to select just 5 lures for the month of March, so I decided to add a bonus lure. The Texas rig is a good choice this time of year because of how many different presentations you can do with this rig depending on if you peg it or not, the weight, and the plastic you decide to put on it. Make sure you experiment with the Texas rig so you know what works best in your area. Personally, I like to peg the weight on my Texas rig so it does not get hung up as much, but it truly depends on where you're fishing it and around what type of structure you're using it around. The Texas rig can be fished pretty much everywhere, no matter if the bass are shallow or in deeper water. The Texas rig will catch them. You can change up the retrieve too and fish the Texas rig many different ways. However, my favorite way to work the Texas rig is by dragging it slowly across the bottom or through structure. You can get some nice sized bass doing this, and it is hands down one of the most versatile lures on this list. If you are not throwing a Texas rig this time of year, you are missing out on how productive this lure can be. The fourth lure I'm going to talk about is the jerkbait. This lure was on my top 5 baits for February, but I had to include it again because of how effective it can be. The jerkbait is a good search bait this time of year and can trigger a reaction strike out of the bass by resembling a dying bait fish moving throughout the water column. The jerkbait is one of my favorite moving baits to throw and can produce some huge fish all year, but works well in March too. The jerkbait works well, especially right before they go on beds and are feeding heavily on bait fish. This is whenever I will throw a jerkbait and will catch some good quality fish. You can change up the retrieval speed and how long you pause it for before working it again. You will have to experiment with this, but I love to fish it more quickly this time of year, but it really depends on what the bass are in the mood for that day. Let me know down below if you use a jerkbait in March. The fifth lure I wanted to talk about is the Wacky Rig. The Wacky Rig is one of my favorite finesse techniques this time of year due to its larger profile in the water. I especially love using a Wacky Rig when targeting largemouth, but also have success targeting spots and smallmouth with it. The Wacky Rig is a versatile rig due to how much you can change the presentation of it by changing up what type of worm you put on it and what type of hook you use with it. Some soft plastic worms sink quicker than others, and some will sink a lot slower, so it really kind of depends. You just got to experiment with it. It can be fished in many different scenarios and shines when targeting shallow bass. I love to skip the Wacky Rig under docks or under branches hanging over the bank. Normally I will trigger a reaction strike once I get it up there. If you do not have a Wacky Rig tied on this time of year, you are truly missing out on one of the best baits to use whenever the bite gets tough. These are my top 5 lures to use in March, and these lures will help you catch more bass whenever you are fishing this month. It was hard to select 5 lures and a bonus lure for this month, but these 6 lures will work in many different conditions across the country. If you have any questions or comments, let me know down below. Also, let me know if you agree or disagree with my top 5 March lures, or if I missed your favorite lure to use this time of year. I would love to know about it, and I would appreciate the feedback. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button to help the video in the YouTube algorithm so more people can see it and so they can ultimately get recommended this video. If you are not subscribed and you made it this far, I would love to have you join the community. We're on the way to 5K subs by the end of the year, and I would love to have you guys join. It would mean so much to me. I plan on doing more videos like these in the future, and I'm gonna at least do one of these once a week. So if that interests you, make sure you hit that little red button down below. Also, make sure you follow me on Instagram. I'll have it linked down below. If you wanna know a good technique that catches bass all year round, make sure you check out this technique right here. I promise you wanna see this video.